Welcome to You Can Do It. Today we've already taken the engine out on our KTM 300 rebuild. So today we're going to take the swinging arm out, check the bushes, check the bearings. If they need replacing, replace them. If not, repack them and then put them back. So basically you've got to take out the swinging arm bolt and take out the bolt here on the suspension, and then that whole swing arm will come out. So let's do that. I'll see you inside. Got the swing arm off the frame now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check the bushes and bearings and check how they are. I've done it like this so I can explain to you actually how it all clamps together, and you can see how there may be situations where you think they're worn but actually they're not. Okay, let's look at these bearings in a little bit more detail. You put your finger in there, you can take out, that's your little end cap in there. So I've actually already cleaned that one, and there's also another one on the other end here. These end caps, and they actually sit on this basically this bush that the roller bearings run on. Now if you hold that like that, I can feel there's absolutely no play in that whatsoever. So what we're going to do, there's no play in those at all, but I mean, I know it's not done many hours this bike, but I just wanted to check because I felt there might have been a bit of a wobble on when it was in the frame, and I now know where that came from, but I'll show you that later. So you take this one out, and then we just need to, I'm just going to clean that up and then just check that for any wear. Clean that all up. Bear with me, I'm trying to do this one-handed. So look, look, that's fine. There's a tiny little bit of just discoloration, but that's it. There's absolutely no markings on that at all, so that's totally fine. Now that would have been probably because these are basically they're in one position and they don't move because these are locked tight when it's all clamped up. So actually the bearing just moves a little bit in one certain area. So what we're going to do is, that looks to me like that's been running on there. So what I'm going to do is rotate that up a bit. So we've got a clean bit there on that face there. Then I'll put that back in. But first of all, what we're going to do is have a look down there into the bearings there. Look. I mean, they're all greased up, but what I'm going to do is actually repack that with a load more grease, just to make sure that that's absolutely full of grease. Because what happens is if you get a pressure washer and you're a bit too, you go too hard with it, you can drive water in there, or you can drive some muck. I mean, not in this bit obviously because your engine's in there, but you could drive some muck in there. And if you get a little bit of muck under that seal lip, then that's when you start getting all your crap in there, when you start going in water again. So there's another seal on that side there, but these are all in really good condition because the bike's only done a few hours, well, it's like 20 hours, so it should be all right. But I'm just double checking it because it's a rebuild, so we just want to make sure everything's okay. So what I'm going to do now then is just going to put my rag in there, just sort of clean out what I can, and then I want to repack them. But I'm fairly certain that bearing is fine, and I'll show you in a minute or two where the movement came from when it was in the frame. So if these were shot and they need to be replaced, and this needed to be replaced, you put in there a screwdriver or a seal remover, and you take out the seal out of that one, and then on one side there's a couple of washers which then come out, and then you have to drive out your bearings. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. If you've got a press, you can press them out. If you've got like a G-clamp even, you can press them out. But you need to have a socket that will fit in there and push against the bearing. And then obviously as the other side comes out, once it gets to this point, you then have to have a socket that will go right over the top of that, that'll rest on that, but the bearing can come out into the socket. But there's plenty of videos on there on the internet of how to do that. If you need to replace those, but this one doesn't need to be replaced, so we'll check that one in a minute. So I'm just going to put some grease. The grease I'm using, the reason it's got that on because I dropped it in the lid split. I'm just using Fuchs premium multi-purpose grease, but any good grease will do the job. Just stick some grease in there, and I'll stick it down inside to the middle of that, and push it down. There's a gap between the two bearings. That's a perfect place to make sure you pack that full of grease, and that'll take a lot of grease up there. So anyway, I'm going to just do that. And when I put this back in, because you can see those marks, they're just coloration ones, I'm going to actually put those up at the top because the force is usually along this edge and the same on the back, so it's basically 90 degrees. Put that in, slide that in, I expect a load of grease will come out the end. Yeah, don't worry about that. I'm just going to clean that up. Now take that should all be cleaned up. So this just goes over the top of this, and then it pushes in there, and that's the one that the seal sits on. And we'll do the same on the other side. There we are. So that's all done. So if you just replace them, or we just repack them like I'm doing, that's how it is. But there's no play in that at all. That's perfect. So those caps fit on the top of the actual sort of bush, and so they're all clamped up tight when the thing's assembled. So now I'm going to go and do exactly the same on that side, so you don't need to watch me do that. So I'm going to take these caps off, look, like that, and then I'll just take it out, clean it, repack it, and then I'll show you something else. Hang on. One thing I will say is when you clean this out, there might be like all lots of crap in there. So be very careful as you clean that out that you don't drive all that crap into the needle roller grease, because then you just gone and actually transferred any muck that was in there into your actual rollers. So I've cleaned that up again. As I say, it's perfect. There's no marks on it at all. It's been through a lot of mud and water, this bike. It just shows you, look, how if you keep these greased properly and don't go mad with the pressure washer, how they'll last you it'll last a long time. So I'm just going to repack that, and then we'll put those. I'll show you something here. When you pack these bearings, you put as much grease in there as you can, and you think, don't just chuck grease in there and then slide that back in, because you'll just push all the grease back out again. It's a bit of a messy job, but you've got to put all the grease in there and then just push it with your finger, so you're pulling it down like that, so you're pushing all that grease in between either side of the roller bearings, so you're completely packing it. So a lot of people just stick a bit of grease in there and then just slide that in. All that does is push all the grease back out again. You've got to squeeze it between the needle roller bearings, so that and the gap in between them as well. So I filled that up with grease, and I've managed to get rid of most of it in between the rollers. So now that's properly packed. That's why they call it packing the bearings. But it's not I should be really wearing gloves, but it's a bit of a messy job. I managed to get rid of all I filled that basically up with grease, and I've pushed most of it now all in between the rollers. So I'm just going to clean that up then. Okay, we'll slide this one back in again. Again, any discoloration is there, so that's all nice, a new clean surface there. There we are, look, you see? It's hardly pushed any grease out because all of it has been pushed between the rollers. So I'll clear that up. We'll put an end cap on there, push that in. Someone's going pretty fast down the mountain roads up in here. Push that in. There we are. Clean that up. There we are. So there's no movement in there. So they're all good. So the way this all works together is they're clamped really tight to each other, and they're clamped really tight to each other. So this is the swing arm bolt. Get the nut off the end. Doing this with the now this is in, as you can check that, but that's in really good condition. But that's actually there's not actually a surface which is actually used for any degree of precision. This is just to actually clamp everything together. So I find the easiest way to pull these out, rather than, you'll be very careful that you don't damage these threads when you're knocking it out of the frame, is that I've got a blind, I just happen to have in the van a blind bearing puller, and I stick that in the end there, because there's a little ridge in the side there which you can then just use the tips of the puller, clip into that, and then you can pull that out. It just makes things a bit easier. So on the bike, this goes in here. I mean, normally, obviously, as I said before, when we took this off, you've got the frame that sits here. this goes through here and it goes through there. So you've got your engine in there. Now if you'll notice here, there's a little bit, see, there's a bit of lateral movement there, and then there's also lateral movement on this one. See, look, that's deliberate because the engine sits in between here, and then there needs to be, in order for the engine to fit in there, it's obviously got a bit of a space, and then once it's in there and you tighten that up, that allows these to move and clamp tight against the engine. So in actual fact, once you tighten this all up, you've got a frame there, you've got your frame there, you've got these caps that sit on the bush, you've got your engine, and you've got these caps that sit on the bush, and then your frame. So when you clamp that all up tight, in effect you've made yourself a tube that goes all the way through, and these parts of the tube obviously run on the roller bearings. So you could have a situation where you think your swing arm bearings are shot, but in actual fact this is loose, because if it's not tight, if this is not it's loose in the frame, because I thought there was play in these bearings, but I realised it was actually just this, because look, there you can hear, I need both hands for this really, but you can hear there's a bit of play in that, but that's just because this bolt is moving inside that bush. But once this is all tightened up tight in the frame, of course this doesn't matter, this movement doesn't matter, because you're actually only looking at the movement of these bushes in here, because that's all clamped up tight. So sometimes you might think your swing arm's bearings are shot, but in actual fact you probably find this might be loose. So before you start ripping the bike down to change them, just make sure that is tight, because if that's not tight, of course it's not all clamping up tight, and then of course it will move because it's going to be sliding on that. You're going to suddenly have this tolerance in between there. So just check that. So that's it. You've repacked your bearings, so it's all ready to be put back in the frame. Okay, so we're just putting this back in the frame. Just remember, there's a little flap section on here. Just down there, you need to make sure that flat section fits inside that little stub on the frame there, just this side. But what I will do, I'm going to do that now just to show you that even though it's all tight and torqued up, there's still movement in this swing arm because the engine's not in place. Torque that up. If you look there, if you look over here, look, if I do it, look at the, you see the movement there? And also here, so you'd think that they were shot. That's just the movement here in between these two. Once you've got your engine in there and it's all tight, you won't have that. So yeah, so just be wary of that.